you know, I mean, I love the nature and I hate winter, so that's a big plus for St. Pete. And St. Pete is different than the rest of Florida, in my opinion, which is also a plus. No offense to the rest of Florida, you're just not St. Pete. It's cool.
St. Pete, yeah, I love St. Pete. I'm not originally from St. Petersburg either. I'm from Louisiana, so
Nice.
this is my this is my preferred Florida place, I guess. I love St. Petersburg. It's great. I love Florida, but I love St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
So we are up and running on Facebook, and we are about 2 minutes away. So I'll just start sort of doing the general introductions, if that's okay with y'all, and so that we can jump right in right on time, and I'll give y'all the full hour. So thank you for everyone who's joined us and everyone who's here, and we're so excited. I am so thrilled. This event has been, I feel like, a couple of months in the making. We've been talking about it for quite a while, but we're so happy to be joined by a local author, Tenea Johnson, and to celebrate her latest release of a collection of stories, Broken Fevers. It's beautiful. I was kind of listening into y'all talking about the cover art on it, which is just stunning. And when I received the ARC PDF from the publisher, I mean, it was just so striking. I was like, this is going to pop off the shelves. It's beautiful. So if you're unfamiliar with Tombolo, or is it the first time you've been to an event with us, welcome. My name is Kelsey. I am the events coordinator here at Tombolo Books, and we are located in the Grand Central District of St. Petersburg, Florida. And so we are open right now for appointment shopping, but we also are shipping our books across the state of Florida and across the country. So no matter where you are, you can get your hands on a copy of Broken Fevers and read this incredible collection. It's must read, I believe. So to do shop it with us at Tombolo, we'll make sure to get this in your hands, and we'll make sure to get a signed copy to you in your hands. Tia will be with us in the bookstore in the next couple of days to sign some copies of this book. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderator and the woman of the hour. So we have with us, and we are very thrilled to have with us also, Michele Tracy Berger, who is a professor, a writer, and a creative coach, and a pug lover. Who isn't, really? Her main loves are writing speculative fiction, though she is also known to write poetry and creative nonfiction too. Her short fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction has appeared or is forthcoming in A 100-Word Story, Glint Literary Journal, The Wild Word, Bing Magazine, Blood and Bourbon, FYA, Magazine of Black Speculative Fiction, Flying South, Oracle, Fine Arts Review, Carolina Woman, Miss, The Feminist, The Wire, and Western North Carolina Women. So a widely published woman. We are so thankful to have you here, Michele. So thank you for being here with us tonight. And then, of course, we have Miss Tenea Johnson, who was born in Kentucky. And from it, she took the calm of the Ohio River and the swell of honesty, sometimes refreshing, sometimes catastrophic, that afflicts the folks born along its banks. Writing sustains her, music saves her. Often as possible, she straddles their borders to create compositions, fusions, hyphenated whatchamacallits better heard than described. Her work has appeared in Mothership, Tales of Afrofuturism, African Voices, Arise, Humanities in the South, Synchronous Daughters, Contemporary American Women Poets, Shades of Blue, Gray, Whispers in the Night, Dark Dreams, 3, among others. She's the author of poetry, short prose collection, Starting Friction, as well as novels Smoketown, Our Revolution and Evolution. And Smoketown has won awards, the Carl Brandon Parallax Award. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Michele and Tenea to get this conversation going. Thank you both again so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Well, this is the event, I feel like, of March, and we're in Women's History Month, and it's just such an honor to be here with you and in dialogue with you, Tenea. So let's just jump right in, because I had the privilege of reading this collection, and I did a blurb for it. And so tell us a little bit about the collection for people who don't know your work, kind of the themes that you take up, and tell us a little bit about kind of the scope and what you feel like readers are going to really dig into.
Well, thank you, Kelsey, and thank you, Michele. The collection, Broken Fevers is pretty varied, but the one thing I'll say is the common thread is my characters tend to go through things. They don't get over things, they have to get through them. So there's something, I think for everyone, this one I try to have some more rays of sunshine, because there's a lot of, you know, dark histories, there's a lot of challenges that people face. But this is the first time I think I've published something I would call humorous. So we have some humor stories, horror, science fiction, magic realism, really varied. So it's my attempt to have something for everyone, but really just all the stories that I thought would communicate best and resonate with the most people.
And it does have that range, which I love. So, you know, we're going to hear from you in a little bit in terms of reading from the collection, but let's sort of talk also about kind of your origins as a writer. Did you always want to be a writer? Were you bitten by the writing bug at a really early age?
I did always want to be a writer. I think always a storyteller. I started off as a poet, actually, and I think I started off as a poet kind of because I also started off as a songwriter. So essentially what happened is my ideas became too big to be encapsulated in this 2-minute song or in a short piece. So then I started to pursue longer stories. And for me, speculative fiction was always the genre. It was really never anything else because there were no limits. I don't do well with rules. So the more rules I can break, the better. And it also gives you the opportunity to take something that might be small or easily ignored and blow it up to the scale of a universe so that someone can step inside it, immerse themselves. So I look at speculative fiction very much as a way of breaking frame and getting into the what if, the true speculations that sort of stimulate my mind, and I think a lot of other people's.
Oh my goodness, I love that. And so, you know, thinking about the explosion of speculative fiction, and just kind of this idea that, you know, there's so many ways that people can enter. For you and I growing up, and I know we're not, I think I'm older than you are, we're not quite the same age, but, you know, it would be interesting to hear a little bit about your literary influences, because I know for me, when I was growing up, when I think about the ways in which I got into horror or magical realism, you know, I was really interested in the ideas, but there weren't necessarily characters always represented that look like us, right? Both in the media as well as in fiction. So I'm wondering how that might have been for you.
For me, I mean, I was always hyper aware of the fact when you are someone that is different than most of the people around you, the things they take for granted, you never do. So I feel like it gives you a depth of experience that, though I did not expect to see characters like me, that didn't make it right. It just means that I learned. And what I learned was that there should be more. And when I did find those stories, because I was fortunate enough to run across, I think it was Homegirls, a Black feminist anthology.
Oh yes,
all
right, yes.
Barbara Smith. And then I was introduced to Alice Walker at a young age. I saw The Color Purple. My dad took me to see The Color Purple when I was 8. So it's like you see the harsh realities of life. And you also see an opportunity to inject some magic so that people that essentially go through it all the time can also find some place where the possibilities are something that's more satisfying. So as a reader, I think I first connected with the Black feminist and also the lesbian fiction and creative nonfiction. And it just stimulated those other parts of my brain that wanted to create something not just inclusive, but spectacular, you know, because we have so little that's spectacular. So I think as, you know, as a Black woman, as a Black lesbian, as a person, as someone from the South, there were so many ways in which the groups I'm a member of are belittled. So it was an opportunity to sort of make us the center and also make us, you know, let us have some fun at times as well. Because there's a lot of racial dynamics. There's a lot of stories about inequality in my work, because I think that it's best if we face what's wrong. How else are we going to fix it?
Well, I love that thread through, you know, the Black feminist literary canon, thinking about marginalized authors who were writing much bigger, even if they didn't get identified as doing speculative work. I mean, you know, when you think about Toni Morrison's Beloved, I'm like, that's a ghost story. It's just at a super high level, right?
Exactly.
So there are these traditions, and I think that's also, you know, when I read your work, I feel some of the playing with language and some of those traditions are just, you know, embedded in the work, and that's just it's very rich. So thinking about your collection, some of the stories I think were published before, some of them are new. I know when you're putting together a collection, and this is not your first collection, authors tend to think a lot about the sequence of stories. I want to see if you wanted to say a little something about that.
This is the first collection that's purely a collection. Everything else I've done, it's been linked. So in my mind, they're almost novels. They're novels composed of stories. This is the first one where every story essentially is supposed to stand alone. So the flow of it was important in that I actually like to be a little bit disruptive. I don't necessarily want to give you 3 stories that make you feel the same emotions, or 3 stories that put you in the same time period, or even 3 stories that are the same subgenre. I like a palette cleanser. Like, I want each one to have its own due. So in order to do that, I organized them in such a way where they were different enough, but as a whole, they take you through a journey.
And can we talk about, I'm not sure what you're going to read from, but I would love to talk about 2 stories in particular. So this collection is fabulous. I could not put it down.
Too kind.
Yeah, so everyone on here needs to go and buy it. But the 2 stories that I would love to hear a little bit about. One of them is The Taken, and how you came up with that idea, and just sort of thinking a little bit about it without revealing necessarily too much about it. But it's such a powerful story and something I had not seen before. And I have to say, I'm a voracious reader, so I was like, you blow my mind.
Wow, thank you very much. The Taken is actually part of Revolution. I have a duology. It's sort of a duology. Maybe there's a third piece, but it's the reparations world, where this genius, Dr. Ezekiel Carter, wants to give Black people, and at first Black people and then eventually poor people, but specifically Black people in the beginning, genetic reparations for slavery, because it becomes very clear to him that that's not going to happen in any other way. As you can imagine, that's not something that the US government just, goes for. They don't fall over themselves to make reparations happen. So The Taken is the story of one radical group's attempt to get people to understand viscerally what the Middle Passage was like, and hopefully, once they have that knowledge, to consider reparations as something that is fair and necessary. So in order to do that, they kidnap senatorial sons and daughters and try to recreate the Middle Passage in a very small, distinct, botched way. I'll just leave it at that. And it's the story of one particular person as she goes through that ordeal.
It's so powerful. I was like, okay, I have to put this book down now and take a breath and come back to it. It's just such a powerful, visceral story where there's you talked at the beginning, these levels of magical realism, science fiction, psychological horror, twinges of that. And this is a story where it has all of those pieces, not the magical realism so much, but the science fiction and the psychological horror and challenges. It's really powerful. Another story that stands out too is, I think my favorite story is in my notes, Sugar Hill.
Oh, interesting. I so wanted to know which one was your favorite. Sugar Hill, surprising, interesting. Sugar Hill. Well, I used to live on Sugar Hill.
And my mom grew up in Sugar Hill. So
that's a particular part of Harlem for those who have not lived, there. And it's the story essentially of Lang Sai-ho, who is one of the Chinese immortals who's living there. And her best friend, or one of her best friends, is an urban fairy. And she receives a disturbing message from him and is concerned for his safety and his well-being. So it's essentially how she tries to track Doran down, that's his name, to track Doran down and make sure that he's safe. And while she does that, you get introduced to all these the seams of the city, as you will, if you will, the sort of supernatural beings that inhabit Harlem and New York City as she's trying to find her friend.
And it's such a powerful journey about friendship, self-knowledge, as well as this bigger backdrop. It feels very heartfelt and full. One more question, then I think people are just on their edge waiting for you to read. So, you know, I'm sure you get asked this a lot. It's a typical question, but I think it's really important. How do you generate ideas? Where do your ideas come from? How do you cultivate them as a writer?
I have a file called Beginnings, right? And in that file, there are plots, there are names, there are places, there are lines that just come to me, or something that I've heard someone say. And then later on, at some point, I decide how I want to develop them. It's a pretty varied process. Some of them, it's a complete story, a complete problem that needs to be solved within the story. So then I just set about how I'm going to do that and what's the best way to honor whatever that story is. And some of them, it's like a puzzle. I just take a piece from here, a piece from there, a piece from somewhere else, and then start to move them around until it starts to resemble what I want, or it feels true, you know, like it makes me feel something specifically. And because I write songs as well, some things end up being multimedia. Some things might end up being a visual art piece, but for stories specifically, I would say usually it's a scenario that comes to me most of the time. And like some people, like I think it's Jeff Ford. Jeff has a lot of dreams, you know, and then suddenly it's a story. But I haven't tried that yet, although it does sound really intriguing. I think for me, it's really just, it's a situation that presents itself. And very rarely it's a character. And even rarer still, I'll get the first line and then I'll just see what happens.
Oh, it's so interesting. It's so opposite for me. I almost always start from character and then kind of work my way back to the situation. And so it's interesting contrast. So are you ready to read for us?
Sure. So I like variety. So I'm going to try to give you some variety. I'm not going to go on too long, but I'm going to give you two pieces that are loosely related, essentially because of their titles. So we'll start with the beginning of Up Jumped the Devil. The devil ran 24 hours a day, in hot weather and cold, free days and curfewed, shuttling folks from the catacombs to the quarters 3 stories above. It did not stop for maintenance, bad weather, or bodies on the track. Policy dictated that the schedule must be kept, so to hell with each and every other thing. The women and men writing new policy, as well as they knew the number of hours required for a week's rations and safe passage back to the limestone tomb where their families waited for them down below. As Muir rode shoulder to shoulder with the workers for the first time, she did not question this unceasing dedication, or why they moved as fluidly and constantly as the workings of a clock, even if it only brought them that much closer to the end of their days. Nor did she feel her father's foolish pride in upholding the world that stood on top of them. Each reinforced Steele's story of it, reaching heights that they would never know. She sat amongst the workers now because he no longer could, and she wouldn't tell him that she'd rather him perish than trade precious moments of her gray and dirty life. She and her father had not been born to the Combs, but were brought there, allowed to escape the carcinogenic winds and scalding precipitation that plagued the city after the drop. That first rainy, scorching night they came to the Combs, Muir wandered away from their group, trying to escape the pain inside her head. Instead, she found an immense door in the face of a mountain. She alerted their small group, and together they watched the door open, meager weapons at the ready, dreading what might come. Muir stood between her father and Ailey, who only spoke 3 words, but fought fiercely whenever necessary. She felt safe between them. When men draped in nylon parkas emerged and offered them refuge, members of their group laughed with relief, Ailey loudest of all. After the men explained that it would be in exchange for servitude, the laughter ceased. Still, Ailey whispered, "Should," even as the smile fell from his face. Sanctuary cost 1 worker from each household. With their last meal a fading memory, the group agreed. Her father did not ask if she would earn their keep, though she'd been grown a long time, and his legs pained him just as much as her head hurt her. He touched her cheek with 2 fingers, as he always had, left her with warm, clean food in her hands, and took his place in the workers' line. He returned some 12 hours later, tired but attentive, as she showed him their new catacomb home. Now 10 years had passed, and migraines or not, she would return his kindness. On this, her first day on the devil, she kept her gaze forward. People packed the car she sat in, and the next 2 or 3 in front of it. On her car, everyone wore mechanic's navy coveralls. In the next, they donned red and green in the one in front of that. Far ahead, in the farthest car she could see, she spied a woman with long gray hair tied by a purple scarf that matched her coveralls. Muir only knew what a couple of the colors meant. At least the workers were grouped by the color of their clothes instead of their skin. And that the combs differed from the hard scrabble world outside. She took a second to savor not enduring her brownness, sat tall in her father's navy uniform, and tried not to think too much of what might wait for her at the end of the line. Muir would bet she'd seen worse. 32 years on the outside, 12 of them after the drop, almost guaranteed it. Almost. Yet their descent into the combs had fostered a glimmer of hope she protected. If that meant this, then so be it. The other workers on the car were quiet, whether because of the early hour or the looming day's work, Muir did not know. Her father had never told her anything about the quarters, but last night he dimmed the oil lamp, pulled a chair close to her pallet, and in whispered tones relayed the intricacies of their survival. I'll stop that one there. So the next one is a little bit shorter, so I'll read the whole thing. And this was written specifically for reading. It's called The Hell You Say. You know country people. They do country shit to you, like hang you head first from a hotel balcony, or threaten you with their granddaddy's gun like she did me, or curse you quiet so you don't know calamity's running your way, intent on dragging your ass. You know, country shit. What? You got to admit, things get quick and tricky here from a look or a missed pardon. Back in Shy, ain't that way. Well, it's different. Trust me. Look, man, I was trying to help her. She can't do what I do. Stand in front of shopkeepers, production heads, and publishers, pitching her wares from West Coast to East. That costs. And with my success rate, it don't come cheap. Maybe out here, 2 bits and a handshake will get you something, but nothing you want to keep. Look, that is what it's about. Still, percentages aren't worth a fight, much less sitting in his cell waiting to shuffling, yes, sir, my way back to freedom. Shit, yes, I will. We may both be colored, but this is her territory. My mentor could plant a seed in a person's mind that would root quick and choke out what did not support it, feed what did. It was more than a gift. It was a power. Some say power is a dangerous thing for a woman to have. I say it's the only way to live. You just have to wield it well. Take that trouble today. You think the sheriff would listen to me if I hadn't? With that fella impugning my character, even whilst you pried his fingers off a tire iron? No, sir. So that's how I spend my time, not worrying about what ignorant folks say. As a businesswoman, I focus on what they read. Claudette called herself a conjurer, but I prefer more flexible terms. When your time comes and your way's clear, you'll decide your title. Just remember that most folks only know what they make it easy to, what you make it easy to. That's why everyone in town knows my signs, but not what they do. You're right, soon the handmade papers and printing press too. He isn't the only paper salesman in the world. You found him, you can find another. Look, Esquire, use these fancy credentials of yours to get me out of here. Again with the contracts. Shit. If I'd signed the first one you gave me, I'd be in business with that crazy heifer. And then where would I be? This ain't no time for jokes. Fine, maybe I wouldn't be in jail. No, you know what? Maybe I would. I ain't signing nothing, man. Do you know why Claudette spoke spells when she had all that power sitting in the back acres? Control. A whisper wish you put out in the world with words. There are bones and baubles to back it, but the speaking makes it manifest. How it's spoken lets you lead the thing and dictate its force. You can't do that without water in the back well. It's too potent. We cut it to keep it safe. Claudette tried farming with it, but that's the summer lightning bug spelled out commands in the fields. Took 2 weeks of gris-gris to convince folks otherwise. After that harvest and days, and I mean days of grinding and storing wheat, she taught herself to blacksmith. She nearly cursed up a storm in the process, and the smoke turned her blonde hair brown, but she mastered it. Spent early mornings and sweltering nights hammering and bending tools into being. Then I'd fetch a trough of well water to cool what she made. Even the steam sparkled with possibilities. Us both sitting there, breathing it in, full of cornucopia bread and new power churning through us. She said to me, "Viv, I believe I found my way. Where you going?" I thought about it till I couldn't keep another thought in my head. I wanted my work to last. And looking over the discarded notes from Claudette's mentor, I found my way. To last, my business need not be born in the world, only in folks' minds. Claudette didn't know it because she couldn't do it. Reading plants the seed the deepest. Now, much as I love books, I can't write with a lick. So I took up a chisel, still warm from the fire, and crafted my first sign, a rough old welcome that still hangs on the front porch. Not my best work, but a good start. It brought you through the front door. Don't worry. It's the last work I put in you, except for these biscuits, of course. You want another? I used a tray she made to mold the handmade paper. Her cylinders are the heart of the printing process. You'd be surprised all the places Claudette's magic fits. No one could craft a useful, lovely lie quite like Claudette. But by the time she passed, she'd mastered the foundry and the anvil too. Your contracts are the next step on that path. Too few people believe in magic. That's why there's so little of it in the world. So the more mundane we make it, the better. So you're gonna help me out? Man, stop pushing that contract at me. I knew I shouldn't have come out here. I can't stand these hick towns. Always a nightmare. Hot, backwards, full of simple Negroes and crazy ass white people. But here, hey, they can't even get that right. They managed to get it backward. I can't imagine why you came back here. I told Sonny this backwater would be hell. I told him. Only thing worse than coming, staying. Shame about him, but the mind is only soil. Fertile or fallow dictates how true the thing grows. You do well to remember that. I'm not accusing, not at all. I know you were playing meek, but you got to read people. Meek don't always work. You can't let folks bully you. Vincent should have signed the contract before you set a meeting with me. Sure, I could have put something on him, but something in them must make it true. Otherwise it won't last. Look at Jim Crow. I never thought I'd see it teetering. When Claudette predicted it, I told her she mistook other white folks for herself, but she saw true, decades early, and that wasn't even her gift. Now, I don't know about most, but enough folks want to do better. We grease the way. No, I'm not saying good is inevitable. It ain't. Or that folks can't do it on their own. They can. A person just gets tired of waiting on someday when there's a perfectly good Tuesday coming right up. It's good to see you smile. I know you're vexed, but there's only so much we can do. He drank it straight. Not much to temper that. Maybe if we pool our power, layer the thing, but that's still a maybe. Speaking of which, car trouble or not, you mustn't bring anyone to the land. If we'd met at the office like we planned, he would have passed plenty of handiwork on the way. The do no harm and the apothecary sign alone would have settled him. If your apprenticeship succeeds, you'll become the steward of this land. One day. Until then, I decide who visits. The no trespassing signs are plenty when you don't shield folks. Understand? Good. I know. That comes with being an apprentice. And most won't be like him. Not to you anyway. It's part of the reason I chose you. I know you think it's because of your schooling and the places you can go because of what's between your legs, but you have a talent for arbitration. I'm interested to see how it shapes your abilities. Just don't take it too far. Know your limits or make some. You see, I looked the other way when he pissed on Claudette's gladiolas and broke branches for sport. But once he helped himself to the well, that's another thing. I just got some water. Look, I'm sweating like a hog, walking all that way in my suit, mind you, to try and do business. And she's gonna pull a rifle on me? Ain't folks supposed to be hospitable down here? Shit, yeah, I raised that tire iron. I told her the same as I'm telling you. Beg some wench's approval? The hell you say? I'll be damned. What kind of natural born fool says something like that down a wishing well? She provoked me. I had to protect myself. I know what is, what isn't, and most assuredly what ain't. He chose. I told him it was the family wishing well. That doesn't take belief. Respect should have stopped him from taking a second sip. He called his trouble. Are you trying to say this is my fault? The hell you say? What do you mean exactly? Hey man, where you going? And that's the end of that one.
Oh, thank you. Fabulous. Let's just take that in for a moment. So I'm curious, given all the things that you do just wonderfully in the collection, and you've been writing for a long time, I'm wondering if there was a place where, or aspect of the craft that you didn't really enjoy as much, or you didn't enjoy as much, where you feel like now you just rock it, like, or something that maybe didn't come easy. And I'm have this question thinking for some of the emerging writers that are listening and thinking about craft and thinking about voice. So just curious.
I would say I probably did not appreciate first drafts as much as I should have. Like, a lot of writing is editing. And a lot of my challenges were wanting it to be perfect, because I used to be the sort of writer that would start at the very beginning and read all the way through and change things as I went, and then get to the new material eventually, so that you're sort of reading the final draft in the beginning, and then later on you're reading the first draft. And then, a perfect world, I still do that sometimes, but really now I end up just it can suck. It can suck in the beginning. It can just be quite poor. So you go back and revise it. So, and that is difficult, just letting it not be very good for a while. And I certainly have more appreciation for that now, because what I've learned about myself is I have to get that out until I can do the real work. Because sometimes I don't see all the connections and all the things that I need to work on until I know what's wrong with it. I don't know what to write until I've seen what's wrong, sadly. So.
Oh, I love that. So did this collection, given that you said it's your first, sort of one that you think is distinctive, did it teach you different things as a writer?
I think this collection, it did teach me more about flow, because I did like to just sort of disrupt the reading experience from story to story. So now I feel as if I have a greater appreciation for those who want to read cover to cover. And I tend to write very short. I don't want to waste any words. That's essentially my style, is waste no words. So it was an opportunity to see what more you can add to the experience if each thing must stand alone, but also must have a beneficial relationship with what comes before or after.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. We have some questions coming in, so I'm going to integrate those. One question is, how has the pandemic affected your writing process and story ideas?
I'm a lot more productive. There's a lot less distraction. It's interesting. It hasn't affected my story ideas per se, but Smoketown, for instance, is a story of a city that's gone through an epidemic. What I found during the pandemic is more people sort of going, how did you know that? Or it's so interesting that you wrote this about that, because I think Smoketown, there are wildfires and an epidemic, and there was something else. But that for me has been really interesting. The fact that people, because I write dystopic things, dystopian worlds all the time, is that certain things that I think of as being common or quite plausible, or just, just around the corner, seem to be outside of other people's general, I guess, sphere possibility. So I don't know if that means I'm pessimistic or what exactly that might mean, but I think that's been sort of people's reaction to my work has been a greater theme that I've seen throughout the pandemic. That and the fact that I just tried to, I'm working a lot more. I'm working on a lot of different things at the same time, because essentially that's all there's to do is to work.
Yeah, it feels like the work has been a refuge, and to some
Mhm.
degree, it's like where we can kind of go in deeply, because to give our attention to so many other things,
Yeah,
it just feels like a place to just deepen, when we
yeah.
can. So I found that too. Has your writing process or your work, I don't know if you're someone who has writing buddies or writing community, has that changed?
I actually do not. I don't have a writing group. I don't have beta readers. It's very strange. I don't even recommend that, but that's my reality. So, I
So
think maybe,
so you come up with the ideas, and
yeah,
then you do some first drafting, and then you put the pieces together like a puzzle, and you just do that and refine that and refine that.
yeah, essentially. And then I mean, I work freelance as an editor and a proofreader. So it can be a bit much. Honestly, I have to take a lot of time in between things so that I can actually read it as an author, as opposed to read it as a proofreader or an editor or whatever the case may be. So I do recommend having those things. I feel as if, and especially talking to other authors, that it's been really helpful to them. So if you can't do, it's just not been my process up to this point.
So we have another question coming in, and I want to come back to the kind of creative process, because I think
Mhm.
it's always so interesting for readers and writers to kind of hear the different ways people come to their work.
Mhm.
Question is, from your reading, it is clear that your characters have very distinct voices.
Mhm.
Do you hear your characters' voices as you are writing, or do these develop once the story is built out?
That's a good question. I think it's almost 50-50. Certain characters, yes, absolutely. Like I'm dictating things essentially. I'm dictating what's happening in my head. And then it's always a really important edit for me because you go back and you revise for different things. Voice is one of the things that I'll do an entire edit just for voice to make sure that it's consistent, because I think one of the pitfalls you can fall into as a writer is that they all sound like you. And to some extent that's always going to be true, but you want full characterization, you want full development of the differing voices. So yeah, I think that's an essential part of it. And I love work where the voice is really strong. One of my favorite books a while ago was Push by Sapphire.
Oh,
Like the
stop. Okay,
voice was
we're on the
immaculate,
same page.
immaculate. And the thing she said and the way she said it, it just hits you here and here. It was, if you haven't read that book,
Please.
prepare yourself.
Yes.
You're going to go through some things.
Get broken
And then,
fevers, then get pushed.
exactly. You might have actually seen the movie, but no. Read the book.
No, yeah,
The movie's
very
great.
different.
The book.
Yes. No, I teach that book in my theorizing Black feminisms class, and
That's
we're
cool.
just mining it, and the power of voice, and actually and voice and point of view, and in the collection, along with the scope that you have across kind of genres, there's also a scope of voice, and I'm curious if there is a voice that you primarily like to work in. This shows the range of voice that you do, but I'm curious about point of view and voice.
Point of view is always a conversation as well. That's been probably a lot of time making sure that I'm not head hopping, that I don't know things that I shouldn't know if I'm this point of view character, but also making sure that it's the right point of view. I'm still like, second person is still elusive to me, but there will be a second person story at some point,
Yes.
because it's like
People have
watching a
such
film.
like
Sorry?
people have such knee-jerk reactions to
Mm.
second person, but when done well, it can be done well. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it has to be done very well because you're assuming a lot, and it's so easy to reject it. You don't know me. You don't know what you're talking about. You're assuming a lot. Get out of here. But I feel as a point of view, it's like watching a movie. What camera, what angle, what do we know? What don't we know? Because really that is crafting the entire experience. The things you know versus the things you don't know, depending on what room you're in and whose eyes you're looking through. Like that is actually one of the things that I find most interesting and satisfying when done correctly.
So do you have a publishing story in terms of how you found Rosarium Publishing and that process?
In the beginning. I have been lucky enough to be in a couple of Rosarium anthologies. So I was familiar with them from Mothership, but I'm trying to remember like what was the first time that I heard anything about Rosarium, and it might have been Mothership, because like most people who have read speculative fiction, and certainly most people that have read speculative fiction by people of color, I was a fan of Dark Matter Reading the Bones, and Mothership was really, for me, in that vein. I could see what they were going for, what Bill Campbell, who essentially runs Rosarium, what Bill was going for, and I was on board. You know, I absolutely wanted to be part of that. So I believe it was Mothership, and then seeing the other titles, you know, that they were releasing, as well as the cover art. You know, we were talking about that earlier, like gorgeous covers, some of the best covers I've ever seen, and some of the best covers I've ever seen that I felt like really added to the work, because we're so used to seeing certain covers over and over, even if they're wonderfully rendered. You've seen that. You know, you've seen that grouping, you've seen that sort of background, to the point where it no longer has the effect that one would want it to have. But I feel like Rosarium, like it's great ideas, it's great art. Like Latrice Gaskins is the woman who did the art for Broken Fevers.
Okay.
Latrice Gaskins.
Okay.
Go find the rest of her work, because it's intellectual and artistic, and it's just lovely. And she's also a lovely person. And I found out later on that we're both from Louisville. What are the odds?
It's a small world. It's a small world. And so that experience just allowed you also, I mean, we should say sort of how we know each other is through Bill.
Yes.
Bill brought us together for the Zora Hurston Festival last year, which was so awesome. And so there was already this relationship, and you know, working with him, and I'm sure he gave you a sense of being able to say things about the cover and have some input. And
yeah, Bill was very generous in that. Essentially said, here are a couple of people I'm thinking about, what do you think? You know, and gave me an opinion, gave me a voice in that process, and did a great job of finding people that were both wonderful artists, both Black women. And I would have been happy either way, but so like even the samples that I saw from Latrice, like what she provided was even better than what I saw. So I feel like it's a certain kind of partnership, and there's a relationship between that art and the work. And I just really appreciated being able to contribute and what she created.
And that's also one of the benefits of working with a press like Rosarium, because they are going to work with their authors in a very collaborative way.
Sure.
So I want to talk a little bit about publishing and your history. What's the less glamorous side, perhaps, to being an author that maybe emerging writers don't always think about as they're thinking about getting their stories out in the world?
The work that's involved, I would say. I mean, how honest should I be? This is what I'll say. I'm a hybrid author, in that half of my work is independently published, and I am Counterpoise Records, The Secret is Out, and half of my work others publish. But it's all been small press, so I feel as if I've had perhaps more of a voice than one would have about different aspects of the process, you know, and the sort of way in which we communicate, where it's friendly. Now, I might be wrong, because I have not had the big publisher experience. It might be quite similar. But so my experience, I think, is probably not what most people are thinking of when they're thinking of being an author. They're thinking of the agent, they're thinking of the big publishing deal, and hey, I like money too. So pursue that. If that's what you want to pursue, absolutely go for it. But I will say the amount of work, the amount of marketing and promotion that you're going to have to do for your own work, and that's big publishers too. Please do not kid yourselves. Those very unglamorous aspects, especially now with social media, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a certain amount of dedication or energy, or you need to subcontract that to someone. So I would say that, and also the wait between when you're done, when it's accepted somewhere, because you might submit over a very long period of time, whether that's to an agent or a publisher, and the wait to actually see it in print. You know, sometimes I think people have this sort of unrealistic idea of what the turnaround is. It's years often, which is part of the reason that I publish things independently. I want a lot of control, and I want it to be out as quickly as possible. So.
And you have, because I remember us talking about this last year, you have, well, one, I think the wave of the future for authors is thinking about being a hybrid author because you have more choices. But I remember us talking a little bit about the entrepreneurial sensibilities that one has as you know, working across these mediums, because you are doing all of those things and applying them. And I was trying to get at too, at that the social media and the marketing piece that a lot of times authors aren't, you know, they're just thinking oftentimes, I'm going to write my opus and someone else is going to do all of that other work. And it's really, that's really, you know, really not the case. So on the other side of that, just thinking a little bit about the Carl Brandon Award, Carl Brandon Society. So the Carl Brandon Society is an amazing organization of people committed to speculative fiction from the fan perspective, and writers as well, and specifically have a focus on marginalized communities, people of color. And you won that award for Smoketown, and I'm curious, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? How was that experience for you?
I'm gonna interject. So I won the Carl Brandon Society's Parallax Award for Smoketown. Michele, this year, for something that was published previously, won the Carl Brandon Society Award, Kindred Award. So I could turn that around, and perhaps if we have time, we'll do that. But it was wonderful to be recognized by people who love speculative fiction and are picky as hell. You're not getting it just because you're an author of color. So it felt like not necessarily a validation, because I'm sort of, it's not my primary reason for doing anything, but it just felt good to be recognized, because sometimes you write something and, you know, the people you know have read it, and maybe you're lucky enough that someone writes you an email about a particular part of the piece, but it can very much seem like it's happening in a vacuum. So if you get the opportunity to poke your head out of the vacuum and see that other people noticed it too, and they liked it, and they not just liked it because they like you, but they appreciated the work, I think that's its own satisfaction. It's quite nice, but that might be validation now that I think about it.
Yeah, thank you for telling people. I mean, I just, and I missed the initial email. So they emailed me the second time. They said, did you see our original email? This is like in November. And I just started like jumping up and down. And I mean, I think it's exactly what you said, to know people who love the work, who read across the work, that they have picture work is just. And then when I went and then I saw, you know, I looked at some of the other winners over the years, I was like, oh my goodness. I just
that's the part you're like, who and her?
Yeah. It makes you feel a part of that larger literary community. So thinking about that also, was there a moment that you felt, thinking way back now, because you've been writing for a long time, that you felt like a real writer? Because so many writers, no matter what their level of, you know, success or visibility, often don't, they have imposter syndrome, they often don't feel like they're real writers. And so I'm just curious if there was a moment, either before getting published or after published, that you were like, oh yeah, I am doing this.
I don't really suffer from imposter syndrome, I'm very happy to say, because it sounds hellish. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel that the work was good. You know, there are things that I don't do well. I'll still try to do them. Doesn't mean I'm gonna put them in the world. You know what I mean? So I think for me, and I told this story not too long ago, but the first time that I wrote something I felt as if I was a writer was actually for school, where I just decided to tell the truth about something. So instead of saying what they wanted me to say, I know how to please a teacher, I decided to give my actual perspective, and it allowed me to articulate who I am, and that, you know, after that, you're not gonna be able to stop me from doing that. So that certainly helped. I would say the award was quite nice because, you know, you get to go to the, I think it was the Aricia Con where they presented it. So, it flew me to Boston and, got a room and all that. That was great. Another highlight. I got a trip to the Bahamas once for the Blue Flamingo Literary Festival, University of Bahamas in Nassau.
Yes.
That was very satisfying and definitely made me feel like a real author, like someone flew me to another country. So that was great. And then sometimes just reviews, because I do read reviews, because I feel like sometimes they have a point. Maybe there's something that I need to be aware of that I'm not, because I don't have necessarily all the sets of eyes that would be best before one puts something out in the world. So it's my opportunity to see things that I can't see because I'm myself, and I wrote it. So I think those things make me feel like a quote unquote real author. But here's the real answer. People always ask you, oh, are you published? And just being able to say, yes, it's quite satisfying as well. So yeah.
It's so powerful. And we have a comment that from the esteemed Linda Addison. I love that you love your work. So yes,
Thank you for being here, Linda.
Such a good modeling for all of us.
Yes.
So we haven't talked as much about your relationship to a term that is now many people think about and know about, Afrofuturism.
Indeed.
And I'm curious. I mean, we were at the Zora Neale Hurston Festival, which was about that the theme that year was Afrofuturism. And so we were all sort of thinking about that. I'm curious, both your relationship to that term and also maybe how it's changed over the years.
I think Afrofuturism is a convenient handle. It's a convenient way for people having an idea of what it is that we write, and also, for better or for worse, now believing that there's value in it because it has a certain amount of cultural cachet. It's in the zeitgeist. Black Panther, ooh, Afrofuturism. I might be interested in that. The origins of the actual term are somewhat fraught because it was not a person of color, it was not a Black person that came up with this term. So, that's interesting. But that's where we are now. Like, that's the moment. It's what people have attached themselves to. And it's what a lot of work is being attached to. But I feel it's very useful from that perspective, because now there are Afrofuturism sections, in bookstores and whatnot. And fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes people finding your work is literally people being able to find your work. What do I Google? What do I ask for, when I go to the bookshop? So I have no problem with Afrofuturism. I still think Black speculative fiction or diverse worlds sort of prefer those terms only because they're wider. Because sometimes Afrofuturism, what do you do with alternative histories? How does that fit? It doesn't really fit. But now Afrofuturism has just become sort of a term that I think is more akin to something like diverse worlds or Black speculative fiction. But those are apparently, they're too wordy, and they don't have as much value to sort of the more pedestrian reader, let's say. Someone that doesn't quite know the depth but wants to be involved. They'll think of that first.
Absolutely. And I think it, like you said, it's a channel now to bring people in because of the larger scope.
Yes.
And then people can kind of go deeper, but then people will also apply the term to work that I'm like, that's sort of interesting. So it's sort of it both kind of opens up some spaces, but also I think as authors, we always have to be aware of the way others are reading us and the way we might think about our work, right? And that kind of, really interesting tension. I just want to say we're getting close to our time. So I just want to encourage, if people have questions, please put them in the chat and I will lift them up. I have a couple more questions. I feel like we could talk quite a while. I'm curious, given that you tend to write by yourself, what do you tell yourself on the days when the writing is not going well? And I'm thinking of that, given that you don't necessarily, I don't know if you do reach out to a writing buddy at that point, but the days where the writing just doesn't feel like it's flowing, what do you tell yourself on those days?
I usually just go do something else. I don't push it, so I'll go play the guitar, or go walk around, or go do something else that I enjoy, because it won't help me. For certain people, it might help them. And I have to say, it's become easier as time has gone on. I don't really, writer's block is not something that I suffer from, because I feel like there are too many other interesting things to go do for a minute and then come back and finish. And then, like, I'm also, because I do all the things, it's not really an option for you to, oh, okay, we're not working today. No, we're working today. That's what we're gonna do. You can edit something, you can do this, you can look at art, or you're gonna write, and that's it. Because again, that's that whole first draft thing. Just get it out. It could not be the best, it won't be the best thing that you've ever written. But for me, either I just make myself do it anyway, or I'll go and do something else. So maybe I'm not too nice to myself.
Well, it also, it's a pro mindset, right? It's I'm here, I'm committed, I can always do something related to the work, even if I'm not doing, the first drafting. I think that's so powerful. And I think that, switching context, like you said, is also super powerful. So a question, how did you start writing alternative histories?
I think, I don't write traditional alternative histories. I think it's generous to say that I do, or inaccurate, because I don't really, what I do is I make alternative magical histories is what I end up doing. Or a straight, true alternative history, I don't think that I've written up to this point. I would not say that. But I mean, history is a lot of horrible atrocities. So I see it as an opportunity to revisit some of that and reframe it, and also just maybe just give us a different experience of the world, because sometimes too much bad can accumulate to the point where one feels as if they can't go forward, and that is not acceptable. I write in a lot of ways to change what's possible by changing what people believe is possible. So sometimes you have to go into the past in order to do that, because it's choices. They're all choices. And in history, a lot of the choices have already been made. So you have to show people, okay, here's some things that could have made all the difference.
Oh, I love that. I just put in the chat a link to Every Tongue Got to Confess, which was a set of oral histories done by the writers who were at the Zora Neale Hurston Festival, and you can hear a lot more from Tenea. It was just, it's a great link. So yeah, Kelsey's going to ask. She was just asking me to post that link on Facebook. Yes, please
Michelle,
do.
Michele Berger,
just Maurice.
Yoma.
Just
mess up Yoma's last name.
Yes, you did.
Well, not even trying.
Number of wonderful writers.
Yes.
So in our remaining time, what are you working on next? What are you excited about in terms of project? I mean, you're going to be promoting Broken Fevers, of course, but like, what's your next set of writing or other creative projects that you're excited about?
I just did a show at a local gallery of future artifacts and new histories. I'm currently working on a fiction album, hoping to get that done this year. And include it in an Afrofuturism story bundle that I'm curating, that Michelle is kind enough to have offered Renew You there in the corner. It's going to be in it, as well as some other amazing works. Let's see, what else? I think that's it for now, because I've decided I get to take a little break after the fiction album, and then I have 2 short stories that I need to work on, and a visual art piece, like taking a story off the page piece for June.
I'm like, okay, I did not ask you about time management, but clearly you are a master of it.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
And those creative
projects, honestly. So
those creative projects, because you write across different areas, they must feed you, right, in different ways, so that you can move. Absolutely. You're one of the few writers too that I've talked to in a long while that moves across visual, music, poetry, and fiction, and that's also very powerful, I think, because it gives you a lot of ways to tell and shape the story. Okay, I'm going to try to sneak in one last question, and if you have another question, please put in the chat. Okay, there's another question, so I will defer to that. when do you know whether a story will be a novel as opposed to a short short story? Good question.
I think I'm more of a short story writer as opposed to a novelist, seeing that the majority of my novels, I think only one of them is considered an actual novel. So just how big it is, and if I can tell the part that I feel is essential within a short story.
Fantastic. And we have another, okay, this is always like, I feel like the popcorn, like people are like, okay, let me get my questions in.
Yeah.
Is the Future Artifacts installation still available for viewing?
It is not. It is not,
Okay.
unfortunately. Sorry.
Okay.
But I'm going to continue in the series. I'm just trying to decide how I want to do that, whether it be, in sort of a book electronic format, or to do another show. I would love to do a full installation. So that might be a possibility, because Future Artifacts it's an idea that's it's gonna stay with me for a while. I'm not done with it.
Okay, I'm going to try to get one more quick one in, and then I'll let you have the last word. So quick one, which I did not sort of pre-screen with you, but I love asking these questions. I have a blog called The Practice of Creativity, and I love doing Q&A with writers. And I often ask them, if you could have a dinner party, okay, obviously we have to imagine socially distant outdoor dinner party at this point, with 3 authors, living or magically from if they're not living, who would they be? 3 authors that you would love to have a wonderful, sumptuous dinner party with.
No surprise here, Octavia Butler. For all the obvious reasons. She's brilliant. Well, she was brilliant, and her work remains. It's ever present. It remains brilliant. It's succinct. It's lovely. It's essential. Ooh, the other 2 are a little bit more difficult. Now, the first 2 that came to mind were Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh my
Other than
goodness.
Octavia, because that's a given. Sorry, done.
Yeah.
But I think I'll stay with that, because there are too many people, honestly. Like 3 is not enough. Sorry. But yeah, I'll stick with that for now.
And wouldn't that be a, explosive, wonderful, magical dinner party? So you get the last word. What would you like to say to potential readers, listeners? Another shout out for Broken Fevers.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you spending time with me this hour that we will never get back again. So hopefully it's time well spent. If you like speculative fiction, if you like work that tries to whisper in your ear, read Broken Fevers.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both so much for this amazing hour. It definitely was an hour well spent. I am so thrilled to just have been a fly on the wall back here at the bookstore. So thank you both so much, Michele and Tenea. And please pick up your copy of Broken Fevers from Tombola Books. Like I said, Tenea is going to come by and sign some copies. Get your copies from us here, get a nice signed copy of Broken Fevers. And again, thank you all so much for being with us, and have a wonderful evening. We can't wait to see you all in the bookstore very, very soon. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This was so wonderful. Thank you.
Well, have a great night.